Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football, taking a look at a 2024 NFL mock draft. It is never too early to start taking a look at the prospects for next year's NFL draft. And again, it's early. I mean, we haven't really gotten into the film on these guys, but when you watch all the players in the 2023 NFL draft, you start getting a feel for some of these guys who aren't eligible yet, but are going to be eligible and be some big time names to watch in 2024. Now, a couple players that weren't in PFS database that we left out. But again, getting a feel for some of these top prospects. Let us know in the comment section what you guys think, what players we might be sleeping on. And of course, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. For the NFL draft fans, we'll try to be working maybe a mock draft or two in a week, just getting a feel for some of these prospects that we'll be talking about 12 months from now. And again, can't thank you guys enough for all the support. So again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys in a big way, and let's get into it. I didn't make this order. PFF has the order. And again, there's some players who I wanted to select that just weren't in the database. So we'll talk about some of those guys too. But the Arizona Cardinals right now projected to have the first two picks in this NFL draft. And if that happens, I don't think there's a better two players to build your franchise around than a guy like Caleb Williams from USC and Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. Caleb Williams, one of the more impressive quarterback prospects that we've seen at the college level. You seeing the NFL value guys who can kind of make it happen, create on their own. Caleb Williams has that in everything he does. And he's also a guy that has the arm to make every single throw that you're going to be asked to make at the NFL level. I think there are some aspects of he needs to play a little bit more discipline sometimes. You see him playing some hero ball, which he can do because he's that kind of guy at the college football level. I don't know if that translates to the NFL, and so maybe you're a little concerned about that. But in terms of every single physical skill set you want to see, like Caleb Williams has that. So he's right now the quarterback one, I think, pretty comfortably. And then if you have that number 2 overall pick, I think you're getting the next best player in the draft in Marvin Harrison Jr., a guy that, similar to Caleb Williams, has every single trait you want in a wide receiver one. He's big, he's fast. The body control is probably his best aspect. Like when he goes up for the football, he puts himself in some crazy positions and makes some of these circus catches just look routine. The one thing I'm most excited for is just the continued development of the wide receiver position for a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. You take a look at some of the Ohio State wide receivers that have come before him in the NFL draft. The biggest thing we always talk about, JSN, Chris Olave, even Garrett Wilson to an extent, has been their polished wide receivers. Like there's no wide receivers in the classes that are more polished in terms of route running, knowing where to sit down in zone coverage than the Ohio State wide receivers. Brian Hartline has done a phenomenal job developing those guys. If Marvin Harrison Jr. continues to add that aspect to his game, he's going to be one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen in a very long time in the NFL draft. Now, pick number 3, the Bucs. If they look that bad, you got to go get Drake Maye. In terms of the quarterback 2, I don't think there's much of a discussion. I think Caleb Williams is quarterback 1 right now. I think Drake Maye is easily quarterback 2 and worthy of that number 2 pick. And I'm almost interested to see if the Arizona Cardinals are shopping that number 2 if this happens, because there's going to be a lot of teams that want to go trade up for Drake Maye. But if you have the chance to get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., that's freaky. That's hard to pass up. And then Drake Maye falls to 3. He's a guy that, again, what you saw from him last year, just insane. The processing, the arm talent, the accuracy, the decision-making. For a young quarterback, he checks all the boxes. Number 4, Joe Alt. The Colts go back to the offensive line, try to build the trenches around the young Anthony Richardson. I see a lot of Olu Fashanu, and I agree. I think Olu Fashanu is also a top 7, top 5 prospect in this draft. I love Joe Alt, though. And he's a guy that's kind of what we were talking about when you're watching these 2023 prospects. He's a guy that consistently popped out. Like when I was watching the Clemson game, handling Myles Murphy with these. Even when Brian Brzee was outside, handling those guys. A monster down blocking in the run game, a very solid pass protector who I think only gave up like single-digit hurries, and I don't even know if he gave up a sack. You're not going to find a more well-rounded tackle who has all those physical skill sets, and that's kind of what you're looking for, right? You want to see the physical traits, and if you couple physical traits with really solid film, like that's where you're getting in that top 5 range. I think Joe Alt has that. He's a guy that I absolutely love early in this 2024 class. And then Brock Bowers. I can't wait for the Brock Bowers discussions next year because, again, it's very similar to like the Kyle Pitts in the sense he's just been one of the more dominant tight ends we've seen in the last decade of college football. He has everything he wants. He's a phenomenal after the catch, just catches everything with ease, creates separation, a true matchup nightmare. Everything you look for in a tight end, and you couple it with very, very good play for his first 2 years at Georgia. He's going to be a guy that you're going to see the P. And I'm to be honest, kind of one of them. I'm not a big tight end with a premium first round pick. Brock Bowers is probably a little different, though. And I'm excited to see what he does in year 3 and then where this NFL draft community decides to stack a guy like Brock Bowers. Pick number 6 to the Packers, that's Olu. And again, we're focusing a little less on position fits and more just talking about the prospects, what I've seen from these guys early on in the process. Olu Fashanu probably would have been a top 10 pick had he declared in the 2023 draft. I was surprised when he decided to come back. But if you stacks another year like you saw in 2023, would be very, very surprised if he's not a top 10 pick in this year's draft. Kool-Aid McKinstry, my cornerback, won early. I like a guy like Kalen King from Penn State. We'll talk a little bit about him too. But Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy that's played very good. He has the length. And you see the NFL, you're starting to see some real trends emerge in the NFL and how they value some of these guys out of college. Length is king. Like if you have length, if you have the ability to put your hands on wide receivers, clog up those passing lanes with your length and ball skills, you're going to go early in the draft. Kool-Aid McKinstry has that. He couples that with elite movement skills. He's a phenomenal punt returner, very twitched up guy. He's looking like kind of a bona fide top 10 pick. And one of the things I note on that is you're starting to see last year, even at this time, and I know everyone likes to say next year's draft is better. Next year's draft is better. This is a draft where, I mean, I haven't gotten into the evaluation portion of this yet, but having watched a lot of college football, there's a lot of guys who are kind of bona fide, like blue chippers early in this process. I think every single player we've talked about so far is that. That's kind of why it's cool to talk about this 2024 draft so early, because you might be seeing teams say, hey, we might pass on a quarterback this year and then go take one of those guys, Caleb Williams, Drake Maye in that 2024 class, because I really do like this class early. Dallas Turner, another Alabama kid who Will Anderson got a lot of hype. Dallas Turner on the other side, even as a true freshman, when Will Anderson was putting that historic year together in 2021, Dallas Turner was making some noise. And if he continues to progress kind of like Will Anderson did, he's also going to be a guy that I think we're talking about as a top 10 pick, maybe a little bit more of a projection than some of the other guys we've talked about, but a damn good football player. And now we get into a little bit more of the projection picks, right? Jared Verse is probably the best edge rusher. I kind of picked Dallas Turner over him because you saw what Jared Verse is. Now he's going into his 4th year. Dallas Turner only going into his 3rd year. He's a young cat who's still putting on weight. That's why I'm kind of projecting Dallas Turner to be here in the top 10. Amarius Mims is another projection. He's a guy that hasn't really started at tackle because you had Broderick Jones, you had Warren McClendon, you had Jamari Salyer. Like you had some really good offensive linemen who are going to be really good pros. Amarius Mims is a guy that former top 10 national recruit going to Georgia, hit the portal for a second because it was hard to find playing time. But man, that's one of those first ones that we've talked about where we've seen good film when he's played. He just hasn't played that consistently. Holy smokes, if he puts it together though. Like this he's a tackle that was built in the lab. And so I'm interested to see kind of where he stacks up after this 2023 film. Jared Verse, not a projection. He's a guy that would have gone top 10 last year. He was my second edge rusher until he decided to come back for another year at Florida State. Very, very good football player. I like him a lot. Troy Franklin, going to the Chicago Bears. He's a guy that I think I would say Marvin Harrison Jr. is a solidified wide receiver 1. I don't think anyone's really that close. In terms of the next best wide receiver, you have a guy like Xavier Worthy. You have a guy like Roma Duzne. Troy Franklin has the long speed. He has the frame to kind of stretch a defense vertically. I also think he's putting together some movement skills and some ability to separate underneath that kind of makes him a complete wide receiver. And if you see that year 3 under him with Bo Nix at the helm, I really do think Troy Franklin, we're talking about a top 15 pick. He's one of my favorite prospects in this 2024 NFL draft. A little bit of a projection, But again, this is a guy that caught for 900 plus yards as a second-year kid. He's been doing it for a while at Oregon. I like his game a lot because he couples the size, the vertical speed, the ball tracking, and if he adds that intermediate game, the ability to separate early in his route trees, I really do think we're talking about a very good wide receiver. And then J.J. McCarthy. Yeah, I mean, obviously Michigan fan here, so I will say that. New England Patriots have had success drafting quarterbacks from Michigan, right? Obviously Tom Brady. J.J. McCarthy has a phenomenal arm, throws the ball in the run extremely well, can thread the needle, and he's also a phenomenal athlete. Going off of what we were talking about with the NFL valuing quarterbacks that can create outside the pocket, give kind of second chances that plays, J.J. McCarthy has that. I mean, he has reportedly 4.5 speed. He's a phenomenal athlete, former hockey player, so he's a tough guy and a phenomenal leader. You haven't seen him yet kind of hit his stride. You saw it maybe at the end of the season. If he continues where he left off at the end of the season in that college football playoff game, in the Big Ten championship, I do think J.J. McCarthy is probably quarterback 3 here. You obviously also have a guy in Quinn Ewers, and we'll talk a little bit about this quarterback class at the end as well and kind of how I see it so far. Mason Smith. Kind of a Brian Brazee-esque career, right? Dominant true freshman, tears his ACL early in 2022. If he comes back and looks back to form, I mean, this is a special guy with the size, the power, and the speed, the lateral mobility that Mason Smith brings as well is special. Like, it's hard to find guys on the interior that are dominant pass rushers and also guys that can take on double teams. Mason Smith probably checks that box. He's a guy that you got to see what the ACL, how he looks after the injury. But if he picks up where he left off before he got hurt, we're talking about a top 15 pick here. And then Rome Odunze. Here he is over Xavier Worthy. I watched a little Rome Odunze last night. And what I saw from him is he's not as twitched up as a guy like Xavier Worthy. And I'll give it that. There's nothing like physically that's that special about his game. He's 6'3". He runs really good routes. He's great. Yeah, I mean, the body control special. Really good addressing the football in the air. Nothing special like Xavier Worthy brings track speed. Troy Franklin brings track speed. Rome Odunze just brings I'm damn good at the position. And I think a lot of NFL teams, you're starting to see what is the NFL value at the next level? What's winning at the NFL in terms of the wide receiver? It's the guys who know how to play the position, run really clean routes. Rome Odunze is that kind of wide receiver. Pick 15, Jazon Newton would have been a top maybe 75 pick had he declared in 2023. You listen to the interviews. He says, now I want to be the best interior defensive lineman in the class. Comes back to Illinois, a guy that gets behind the line of scrimmage. Jazon Newton, I think, has he's a little bit more reliant on some of the guys and what some of the young interior defensive linemen do. You have a guy like Mason Smith we talked about. You have a guy like Leonard Taylor from Miami that we'll talk about. If those guys put together dominant seasons, I think they might jump Newton. But in terms of the film and what these returners have coming in, like he probably has the best film in this class. So he's probably my interior defensive line 1 as of right now. But guys like Leonard Taylor, Mason Smith, who are just so physically gifted, could be guys that are kind of jumping up on Jazon Newton as this process kind of continues. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. This is another guy that I, for one, as kind of not a Clemson fan, but a guy who watches a lot of Clemson football. Trenton Simpson got a lot of hype. He's a very good athlete. In terms of the best linebacker on that team, wasn't really close. Jeremiah Trotter, great instincts, great size, can go sideline to sideline. Trenton Simpson was a phenomenal athlete. He has everything you want in a linebacker. Wasn't really playing the traditional linebacker role. A lot of overhang, a lot of blitzing off the edge. Jeremiah Trotter played that Mike linebacker spot and did a damn good job at it. He was a guy that when you watch Trenton Simpson, your eyes keep going to Jeremiah Trotter Jr. And he was a very special player that I right now, linebacker 1, first-round pick. Emeka Egbuka. This is I left him off my first-round mock a week ago. Got some heat for it. Very good. I mean, a top 10 national recruit out of that 2021 class. He's very good after the catch. He creates separation very well. I'm interested to see what he does in year 3. Again, I'm not saying that I don't like him. He's a tricky one. And my brother and I have had long conversations about Emeka Egbuka, but he's a guy that I certainly could see himself working into that top 15, arguably the second best wide receiver in the country, right? I mean, still caught for 1,000 yards. Maybe I'm just letting Marvin Harrison Jr. kind of wash out what Emeka Egbuka can do because he's a damn good football player too. The Minnesota Vikings, I really do think this is a team that's going to be looking for a quarterback next year. Quinn Ewers, that's a projection, right? You've seen flashes. Obviously, the number one recruit out of high school, a crazy, crazy arm talent. You've seen flashes of him being one of the best quarterbacks in this class. He just needs to put it together because you also saw some really ugly games out of him. And I think Newton transfers into Texas, looks good, gets hurt, comes back. Just never really seemed to get in a rhythm. But when he was in a rhythm, looked awesome. Crazy arm talent. Very, very accurate, has all the throws you want a guy to make, just needs to put it together. Because, again, you're going to see guys that, like, you got to draft the film too. And if he doesn't put it together on the film, he's going to be a quarterback that slides in this draft. Xavier Worthy next up. I kind of lumped those guys together because I do think these guys could be top 10 picks, both of them. They just need to put it together. Xavier Worthy, track speed, really good tracking the football down the field. Very twitched up, very good after the catch. He's a little undersized, and that'll be the knock on Xavier Worthy when we're 11 months from now talking about these prospects. He's very small, but he also is a guy that has elite movement skills, extreme speed over the top, and tracks the football really well. You're starting to see teams. There will be some teams that probably just won't value him much because of the size, but there's also going to be teams that say, hey, I watched the film. He's very, very good football player, crazy movement skills. We're going to go take him in the first round. So interested to see what the conversation around Xavier Worthy is. Kalen King, another guy that when you watch Joey Porter Jr., it's like, okay, who's the guy on the other side? Because he's a stud. 16 passes defended, just like very good at mirroring receivers, very good at playing the football. He's cornerback number 2. And I think this, quite frankly, might be a little low for Kalen King because he is an absolute stud. J.C. Latham falling a little bit. I've had him in the top 10. I'm interested to see if he plays left tackle, played right tackle. I don't know if that'll be a sticking point for teams. Like Darnell Wright, you saw go in the top 10 as kind of a guy that slated in to play right tackle. Top 3 player nationally out of his recruiting class, has all the traits that you want. So I do think that J.C. Latham will be a first-round pick, and the film's good. Like, he's done everything expected of him. It's not like he's a guy that came in and hasn't put good film together. Like, he was awesome in 2022. I just wonder if teams are a little concerned that he hasn't played left tackle. JTT from Ohio State going to the Ravens. This makes a lot of sense in terms of schematic fit. Interested to see what he does with his body, right? 6'4", 270, like a bigger, heavier-handed edge rusher that can also put on some weight and kind of be a versatile 3-tech position guy too. But he's probably not as athletically gifted, and this might just be wrong. I'm interested to see his testing numbers a year from now. I think there's some other edge guys like Jared Verse, like Dallas Turner that might be more gifted in terms of burst and bend. But, man, the power in JTT's hands, next level. And so I think there's going to be teams, especially like the Ravens, who like to play a versatile defensive front. This guy can do it all. He can play 3-tech, can play that 5-tech. He can play outside. Lot to like about JT, especially that power in his hands. And Denzel Burke, there's a lot of NFL talent on the Ohio State Buckeyes this year. Denzel Burke had a bad 2022, but you go back and look at him as a true freshman, like one of the best cornerbacks in the country, has it all. You just want to see him put it together. And I think a lot of the Ohio State defenders struggled year one in that Jim Knowles offense. You had Jim Knowles defense, I should say. You had a new defense. I think a lot of the players were thinking, not playing, and that's not good. And so if you get a guy like Denzel Burke who's back to playing, just playing some reaction football, going in and attacking the football, I think you're going to see a lot better of a version of Denzel Burke. I do think a lot of these Ohio State guys were in 2022, they were thinking too much because that Jim Knowles defensive scheme is really complicated. But if you get a guy like Denzel Burke who just starts playing football again, you're going to be talking about a really good cornerback. Rook Aurora from Clemson. Massive fan of Rook. He was going to be a top 50 guy on my board had he declared. He's so good. Everyone wanted to talk about Brian Brzee on the inside. Rook, probably had the best film of all the Clemson defensive linemen last year. And that's including a guy like Miles Murphy, who I love, including a guy like KJ Henry, who I love. Rook, from the inside is a phenomenal pass rusher, can play the run. You're drafting him for his pass rushing chops. He's long. He's athletic off the line of scrimmage. He's got a great first step. He's a guy that the only problem is like he's older. So I don't know if you're going to see a massive jump. But Ruko, man, his film is really, really good. The next quarterback off the board, and that's going to be Spencer Rattler. We'll talk about the quarterbacks at the end of this draft. I think you have a bunch of young guys, right? Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, JJ, Quinn Ewers, who I think a lot of the NFL teams are going to gravitate towards because of their young, because they're really, really tradesy. Spencer Rattler, obviously the former 5-star, doesn't work at Oklahoma, transfers to South Carolina. When you saw Spencer Rattler get good protection, one of the best arms in college football, can make every single throw, can be a guy that can use his athleticism. I wouldn't say he's a top end athlete, but is a guy that can extend plays. But man, when he struggled when that South Carolina offensive line couldn't protect him, when they figured it out a little bit and started protecting him, you saw the best version of Spencer Rattler down the stretch of that season. If he puts a season together that was like the last couple of games of 2022, I think Spencer Rattler's in the first round of this conversation because there's no question about what he brings. And I think he's answered a lot of the maturity questions too, right? I think one of the best things for him was transferring to Oklahoma, getting in that culture of South Carolina. I think he grew up, and including myself, was a guy that he's hard to like early on because he was kind of a jerk. But man, like he's looking like he's grown up, matured a little bit. Really excited. I'm rooting for Spencer Rattler. I'm a Spencer Rattler guy right now, and I'm a Shane Beamer guy. So I'm really excited to see what they bring to the table. Cooper Beebe, nails. Todd was a top 50 prospect on my board before he went back to Kansas State. I don't know why he went back to Kansas State, but he did. He's going to be really good. Now he's going to need to show out in a big way to convince teams that he's worth taking as a top 32 pick as an interior offensive lineman, but might have been my number one interior offensive lineman had he not came back to Kansas State. Leonard Taylor, that's a projection. I mean, we've seen flashes of dominance for Leonard Taylor, and then you've seen some stuff that like a little bit inconsistent. Very similar conversation to Gervin Dexter. Wouldn't say they're the same player, but both Florida Cats who like you've seen really good things from him. You just haven't seen it consistently. Gervin Dexter was getting mocked in the first round a lot, and he still ended up being a top 50 pick because of those traits. When NFL teams see the flashes of dominance, they're going to gravitate to it because their coaches are going to believe that, hey, we can get the best out of a guy like Gervin Dexter or Leonard Taylor. Leonard Taylor might go earlier than his film might say. Malachi Moore, Brian Branch 2.0. You guys know I loved Brian Branch, so I had my Buffalo Bills taking Malachi Moore, a guy that he's going to play the same role that Brian Branch. Brian Branch was just better than him last year, but Malachi Moore is going to play the same role that Brian Branch played in this Alabama offense, or defense, I should say. Kind of like that slot guy, box safety. You're going to see him blitz. You're going to see him do everything. He is a Swiss Army knife. I believe that's the term, but that's what he is. And you see teams gravitate towards, I want to get speed on the field to cover the speed on the offense while also being able to stop the run. Malachi Moore is a guy that's going to fit every personnel because he can do so much. Can play deep safety, can play the nickel, can play as a box safety, can blitz off the edge. Love Malachi Moore. If he like the one thing with Brian Branch is Brian Branch didn't test very well. Right, 4.6, 240. I think that knocked him down a lot of people's boards. Malachi Moore tests well. Like I really do think he's going to be a first round kind of guy. TreVeyon Henderson, and this one hurts me because I'm a Michigan fan, but not having Blake Corum go and taking TreVeyon Henderson. You go back to TreVeyon Henderson as a true freshman, average 6.8 yards per carry, caught for 312 passing yards, was arguably the second best running back heading into last year behind Bijan Robinson. I mean, as much as I love Blake Corum, TreVeyon Henderson is the complete running back. You saw two running backs going, Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson last year. TreVeyon Henderson, I think, is better than Jahmyr Gibbs, probably not as good as Bijan Robinson. I think he'd be going in this first round. And the Eagles go get DeAndre Swift. I don't know if they'll bring him back after his rookie deal. TreVeyon Henderson would be a guy that I think would be a phenomenal fit in that Philadelphia team. Cedric Van Pran, phenomenal fit in the 49ers offense. I think he's the best center in this class. I think would have been arguably the best center in this year's class as well. Massive fan of Cedric Van Pran. Very good double team and working up to linebackers, but he's also a phenomenal athlete. And that's what you're seeing a lot of teams go to. You want to pull your center, you want to have a good athlete who can get out in space. Cedric Van Pran can do that. He's done it at a high level at Georgia, and I expect him to do it at a high level in 2023 as well. JT Sanders, I was banging the table for the Bengals to take a tight end in this year's draft. They did not. Jatavion Sanders, yeah, he's tight end 2 under Brock Bowers, and I think he's maybe a little bit of a projection, but I think he was one of the best tight ends last year as a sophomore. Can do it all, can block, can be split out wide. Joe Burrow loves his tight ends. go get him a very good tight end in JT Sanders. And then the Kansas City Chiefs. I wanted to leave the Kansas City Chiefs open because I did want to talk just a little bit about some of the quarterbacks in this class. And we're not taking a quarterback for the Chiefs, but I just wanted to leave this open so we could talk about some of these guys. Michael Penix, Bo Nix are two guys that I thought had some of the best film in this quarterback class in 2023. One of the things that's a problem is you've seen some inconsistencies for both of them, right? Michael Penix Jr. had some bad seasons at Indiana before getting to Washington. Bo Nix did not make some good decisions when he was at Auburn. Now, I think both these guys could be first-round quarterbacks if they put together another good season. I think that's why, quite frankly, they both went back to school. One, both those teams are going to be top 10 teams. Two, I think both of what they heard from the NFL scouts is we just want to see another season of it. Because Bo Nix, a former 5-star quarterback, has all the traits. Michael Penix, the lefty gunslinger, also has a lot of good traits. I love both of those quarterbacks. I want to see one more year of them. And I, quite frankly, am very confident in both of these quarterbacks to put up another good season. And then the discussion just comes down to, are you taking the J.J. McCarthy or Quinn Ewers, who's a little bit younger, maybe a higher ceiling? Are you going to take in the proven better quarterback on the film in Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix? It's going to be an interesting conversation to have. Tyler Van Dyke's another guy that you saw some flashes, but Josh Gaddis killed him. Shedeur Sanders, you just have to wait. You got to wait to see what he can bring. And then Jordan Travis, I don't know if he's going to be a great NFL quarterback, but he's a very good college quarterback. All right, Kansas City Chiefs. Let's take a pick here, though, for the Kansas City Chiefs. Talk about Blake Corum again. He's a guy that I really like. A.D. Mitchell's a guy that I like. Johnny Wilson. I'm going to go get Braylon Trice. Braylon Trice needs more love. One of the more dominant edge pass rushers in this class, in the country last year, quite frankly, decides to come back to school. He's a guy that if he puts together, and you're seeing some of these Washington guys like Michael Penix, Rome Oduzne, Jalen McMillan come back to school for one more year because I think they can win a Pac-12 title, be a college football team. So I think you're seeing a lot of really good players who could have been top 50 picks in the NFL draft come back to school. That'll do it for the first round mock. Again, I really do like, to just round it out, I really do like these like top 7, maybe even top 10. Like Amarius Mims is a little bit of a projection, but Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake Maye, Joe Alt, Brock Bowers, Olu Fashanu, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Those 7 guys right now are blue chippers for me. Like, that's how good I think those guys are going to be. Jared Verse probably in that range too. Dallas Turner and Marius Mims, maybe somewhat of projections. This draft class looks really good. I'm really excited to see how this draft class kind of plays out because there's some really good prospects in this class. Yeah, and appreciate you guys checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Can't thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. We'll be back taking a look at another 2024 NFL mock, maybe ours, maybe someone else's later, and we'll talk to y'all later.